I'm Michael Kugelman, the South Asia Program Associate for the Wilson Center's Asia Program. Ever since Pakistan's independent media outlets were liberalized in 2002, they've taken on a fascinating life of their own. Pakistan's press has been described in a number of ways, from free to feisty, to polarizing, exasperating, among other terms. However one may describe the media in Pakistan, most would agree on the important role that they play in the context of Pakistani politics and society, which is the subject of our event today. The Wilson Center has been extraordinarily fortunate to have had Huma Yusuf with us since last September. Ever since her arrival, she's impressed people left, right, and center. She is our current Pakistan scholar, the 7th Pakistan scholar that the center has had. The Wilson Center is very grateful to the Fellowship Fund for Pakistan, a Karachi-based charitable organization, for enabling us to hold the Pakistan Scholar Competition each year and to host people of Huma's caliber. Many of you know Huma. In fact, I'd say that she's perhaps amassed a larger Rolodex in the several months she's been here than many of us have over several years here. She's a very well-respected and award-winning journalist back in Pakistan. She's a reporter and columnist with Dawn, and has continued to write her column while serving here. And you can read her bio handout to get more info about her. So I've said enough. I don't want to take any more time up, so I will now cede the floor to Huma.
Thanks, Michael. I'd also like to thank you all for coming, and I really look forward to the discussion and your questions and feedback on a topic which I'm still researching, still thinking about, and happy to take some pushback on some of my reads of the Pakistan media. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the Wilson Center, and in particular the Asia Program, for giving me this opportunity to present my research. And I would also like to acknowledge the Fellowship Fund for Pakistan, which has made my time here possible. Let me start by taking us back to the evening of July 5th in 2007. Some of you may remember that summer, when the Pakistan Army laid siege to the Lal Masjid, or Red Mosque, in Islamabad, the capital city of Pakistan. Militants and radicalized students under the leadership of two fiery cleric brothers were holed up inside the mosque after making several attempts to inform Islamic law across the capital. Tensions were high as Pervez Musharraf's military government tried to get the clerics to surrender and prevent the standoff from escalating into a bloody conflict. On that evening of July 5th, Kamran Khan, a popular talk show host on Jio TV, the first privately owned television channel to launch in Pakistan, decided to take matters into his own hands. On a show called Mil Jul Kar Jio, a live call-in talk show, he contacted Maulana Abdul Rashid Ghazi, one of the cleric brothers in charge of the mosque, and urged him to surrender so as to prevent the unnecessary bloodshed among students. Ghazi agreed to put down arms, but only on the condition that he and his followers be granted safe passage. On hearing this, the talk show host Kamran Khan got the Information Minister Tariq Azim on the phone, and live on TV conveyed Ghazi's request for safe passage to him. Totally caught off guard, the Information Minister simply said that if the militants surrendered, they would be treated according to the law. Kamran Khan then called Maulana Ghazi back and conveyed the state's position on the issue and continued to urge him to surrender. When Ghazi insisted on safe passage as a condition for surrender, Kamran Khan put the matter to a public poll via SMS text message and asked the audience to weigh in on which stance they thought was more acceptable. Those of us watching that broadcast knew that this was a pivotal moment in Pakistan's media history. A privately owned television channel had transcended its role as a watchdog and had assumed political agency. Rather than merely reporting the news, the channel was making the news, and specifically trying to alter the outcome of a news event. That dynamic, established about 4 years ago, is what brings us here today, to consider the political and social implications of an independent media in Pakistan that is not merely a carrier of national debate, but a catalyst, itself initiating heated, controversial debates. In the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to try and describe the political and security environment in which Pakistan's independent media operates, and then show how the constraints under which the media operates influences the coverage of two issues, the threat of terrorism within Pakistan and the US-Pakistan bilateral relationship. Before I continue, let me explain what I mean by the media for the purposes of this talk. Until 2002, as many of you know, the Pakistani electronic media comprised of 2 television channels and 3 radio channels, which were state-owned, and the content of which was strictly controlled by the ruling government or the army, depending who was in power. 9 years ago, General Pervez Musharraf's military regime allowed for the privatization and liberalization of the electronic media. Pakistan now has almost 90 television channels, about 30 of which are specifically news and current affairs channels, in addition to 135 private FM radio stations. When I talk about the media today, I will refer primarily to the new, national, Urdu language television channels that focus on news and current affairs. More specifically, I will talk about the content that appears on hugely popular political talk shows, which often bring together a famous, trusted talk show host with a panel of experts, which often include retired military personnel, retired intelligence officials, politicians, and others, and which are broadcast on most news channels between roughly 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. every night. It is worth noting that these news channels are, of course, part of a much wider media landscape on TV, which includes entertainment channels with back-to-back soap operas, sports channels, music channels, fashion TV, Quran TV, and the rest. There are also lively regional language channels in Pashto, Sindhi, Saraiki, etc. Notably, these private TV channels cater to a Pakistani public that is largely illiterate. Most of you know that Pakistan's literacy rate hovers at under 50%, and that figure is considered by most to be largely exaggerated. According to official statistics, the private channels reach 40 million viewers, but owing to the informal nature of the cable TV industry, unofficial stats put viewership as high as 70 million. What this means is that the electronic media is extremely well positioned to influence the public sphere in Pakistan. It is also worth noting that this nascent media industry has been on a veritable roller coaster ride since its inception. In less than a decade, it has had to report on, contextualize, and analyze an economic boom followed by an economic collapse, a military dictatorship followed by turbulent democratic rule, the 2 worst natural disasters in the country's history, 3 major political assassinations, the rise of violent extremism in Pakistan, 1 imposition of emergency rule, and one of the largest civil society movements in Pakistan's history, which was the lawyers' movement to restore an independent judiciary. Despite the immense tasks the media faces in reporting on these complex events, the industry works under very serious constraints. And the first thing we have to ask when we're talking about this industry is, how free is free? Reporters Without Borders elevated Pakistan's ranking from 159 out of 175 countries to 151 out of 178 countries in its Press Freedom Index of the period 2009 to 2010. That's quite a leap. But there is a flip side. Pakistan is currently the deadliest country for journalists in the world, with 16 journalists murdered in 2010 and 3 journalists already killed this year. These journalists have been killed by militants, by intelligence agency officials, and even the hired thugs of political parties. Last year it was revealed that in 2007, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting maintained a 570 million rupee secret fund that was used to buy off journalists and others who disagreed with the government's point of view. The government also continues to be the main advertiser and therefore source of revenue for most media outlets. When displeased with media outlets, the government pulls advertising revenues, forcing channels to either toe the line or face bankruptcy. The Army's public relations wing has greatly expanded in the period that we're discussing today and carefully monitors the airwaves. Commentary about national security issues or criticism of the Army remains largely unacceptable. The Army also maintains a complete information vacuum in the tribal areas of Balochistan and many parts of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where military offensive against militants have been conducted, and which geographically accounts for more than half the country.